Today we're going to talk about the Four Noble Truths. But before I go through the Four Noble Truths, I want to give a couple of scenarios. The first is, imagine someone who is having dinner with somebody that they're very attracted to. And they want to project an image of themselves which they think will be attractive to the other person. But unfortunately, they, trip on the stairs going into the restaurant and drip soup on their shirt, and they knock their water glass over. So things just don't go according to plan. And this creates a lot of stress. Both the anticipation of having to create this image, which was going to be attractive to this other person, and the fact that it didn't work out as hoped. So the fundamental premise behind this whole thing was that this was a person I was attracted to. I want them to see me in a certain way, so I'm going to project that image to this person. And through projecting that image to that person, I will get some kind of satisfaction in the end. It will all work out there will be some payoff in the end by having this person see me in a certain way. So imagine the same scenario, the same dinner, but without the effort to create that image, where you could just sit and have the dinner, enjoy the conversation, enjoy the food, have a nice evening. So what's the difference between these two scenarios?
Expectations.
Expectation, that's a wonderful word for it. Expectation. There was something in mind beyond what was going on in that moment. It was something that was well into the future that was in mind when this was going on. So all the things that we can find a source of pleasure, a source of attraction to us, we always have a choice whether we can appreciate those things as they are, or how we want them to be in relation to us. So the difference is recognizing that having this expectation creates this stress and the struggle and suffering, which actually blocks our ability to appreciate the moment itself. So the person who, in the first scenario, the person wouldn't have much of a good time at that dinner because all of the stress and everything would have blocked their ability to have the appreciation for that dinner. Whereas the second scenario, whatever pleasure was there in that moment would be available to that person completely without that wall that blocks that away. There's a story I've told in these classes many times about when I lived in Seattle. I went to a park in Seattle called Green Lake. It's a very nice park which has a lake in it, and there's a 3-mile trail that walks around the lake. And I went up there on Saturday afternoon, and I did the walk 3 miles around and went home. And on Sunday, I went back and did the same walk. And on Sunday, I recognized that on one side of the lake, there's a whole grove of cherry trees. And the cherry trees were all in bloom and were absolutely gorgeous. This spectacular bloom of cherries. And when I had gone up on Saturday, I walked all the way around the lake and never noticed that they were even there. Completely oblivious to this. So, depending on how you are bringing your mind to this moment, changes completely how your capacity to experience this moment. So I said I was going to talk about the Four Noble Truths, so I want to relate back to this scenario. The first Noble Truth is what is called the truth of dukkha. And dukkha is a Pali word. Pali is the language that a lot of the original Buddhist texts were written in. And dukkha is a Pali word which is sometimes translated as stress or suffering or unsatisfactoriness. But what it means is that dukkha is the inability to get real satisfaction from the things in our life if we try to hold on to them. Because the holding on is the second noble truth. It's usually translated as thirst or craving, but it is actually the expectation that you mentioned. So if we can approach life without this expectation, we have available to us peace of mind and what I like to call joy, which is the appreciation for the things of life without the holding on. That's our experience of the things of life without the holding on. And that's the third noble truth.
Could you explain the dukkha again?
Yes, dukkha means that if one of the lines in the text says all conditioned things are dukkha. And all conditioned things are pretty much everything in our experience. And that means that if we approach these things in a certain way, which is this quality of expectation, this quality of holding on, this quality of craving, we will not get anything from that but stress and suffering and unsatisfactoriness. Another example is if I bought a new car. So if I buy a new car, it's beautiful and it's completely pristine and I would love it to stay that way. But the fact is that it won't stay that way. But if I have the expectation that it will, then that car is dukkha. That car becomes a source of suffering because of my worry and stress about somebody scratching my car or something else happening to it. Whereas if I get that car and have the attitude towards it of it's already a piece of junk, even if it's still in its pristine state, then I won't have that stress and I can still get the full utility of the car. I can drive it around and do all kinds of things with it. But I don't have to have it as a source of stress. So there's kind of a trade-off here. Because if I do this with the car, then I'm giving up the sort of the thrill or the pleasure of the beautiful new car. Because I'm just basically letting that go. I'm saying, this car's a piece of junk, even if it's brand new. But what I get in return is I get, like I say, peace of mind and joy, the joy of life, of not having the stress and the struggle and the general turmoil of mind. And the reason that you can really experience a sense of joy in life when the stress isn't there is because your mind is so much clearer. So you have a kind of intimacy with life that is simply not available to you when you're holding on to things. So you always have that choice. And it's not an easy choice to make, which is why Buddhism defines a very specific training which allows us to make this choice. It's not just something you can decide to do because your mind is already very into a mode of going one way with this, which is going for the stress. That's what we do. But there is available to us another option. And that is to train with the meditation that we do in here to be able to become disenchanted with this first approach and gradually turn ourselves to the second approach, which is letting these things go. And it doesn't mean that you can't have appreciation for all the things that you like in life. But it just means that you can't hold on to them. You can't say that I'm going to keep this the way I want it to be, because we don't have that ability. And the attempt to do that is just what causes the stress. Yes?
This is dukkha. Are you born with dukkha? Is the mind built around dukkha?
I don't know the answer to that so much as somewhere along the way, we develop this habit, whether it's born in us or whether it's taught to us or how it comes about, I don't know, but we all have it. And so we also all have the ability to take the different approach. So any other questions? Yeah.
Can we have the initial excitement of the car, but then just understand that it won't last? Can we have both?
Yes, what I'm saying is that if you do the kind of training that we're talking about, you will recognize when the initial excitement comes up, you will recognize it as something that you have to let it come and float away. But most people can't do that. And it's just, it's very important to make the point that it doesn't mean that you cut yourself off from the world or anything like that. Like let's say that this dinner scenario that I started out with, maybe I was somebody who was working in a big company and I had a coworker who I thought was very attractive. And I wanted to ask her out to dinner. And I did, and miraculously she said yes. So we, went out to the dinner. And I could still appreciate this person completely. For whatever reason, I found her attractive, and that's just fine. As long as I recognize that as soon as I try to, what our minds do is anytime there's something that we're attracted to, there's a little, like a program that kicks off saying, how can I get more of this? And what we're talking about is recognizing when that program kicks off and just say, no, we're not going there. Everything else can stay the same. I'm working the same job. I'm doing my job in the same way. I can have a relationship with this person, but it's a relationship that is built on just not having this extra thing in it. And, it goes whichever way it goes. But it goes that way without the effort to create that image. In that first scenario, the real kicker was the effort to create the image. And if I abandon the effort to create the image, then everything else stays the same. I have the dinner, I spill my glass of water, whatever, but it's not a problem in that case because I'm not creating the image. So I'm just being myself. And I'm not having the stress. And because I'm not having the stress, that person I'm having dinner with might say something tremendously insightful or wise, which I wouldn't even hear if I was so caught up in the stress of trying to create that image. So I say it changes the whole experience of life. Any other questions?
So is that the second truth?
So the second noble truth is, in the case of that first scenario, the second noble truth was trying to create that image because the image was tied with what I wanted to get out of this. I wanted to get her to see me in a certain way. So there was a craving, there was a expectation, there was a wanting to have something come out a certain way. That's the second noble truth. The first noble truth is just the stress. The second noble truth is the wanting, the craving, the trying to create the image, all of the sort of maneuvering that you're doing and you're basically trying to get things to come out a certain way. And the third noble truth is recognizing that that's not going to work out and abandoning the effort to create that image. And then just having the dinner without that. That's the third noble truth. Now this is a very, there's lots of different implications in the first three noble truths, but this is one way you can look at it, which I think is helpful in recognizing that it's not anything that's really sort of up there in the clouds. It's a very down-to-earth concept.
The second one again?
It's a craving, expectation, trying to get things to come out a certain way, instead of just being with the experience of the moment.
So what's the difference between that, like normally we say if somebody doesn't care, that person is not that upset if something happens. The difference between a car person
And the difference is, and the difference is very important. And the difference is that when we're talking about the third noble truth, which is the abandoning of this effort it doesn't mean that you don't still live your life the same way you're living it now, except for the expectation. You can do everything else in the exact same way. But what you bring to, it's you're focusing on what you're bringing to this moment instead of what you're going to get out of it. Think of it that way. So if I'm sitting there having that dinner and I'm just focusing on the good food and the good conversation and the experience of that without any thought about anything beyond there. The other way I've talked about it in here is talking about the destination versus the journey. So sitting there and having the dinner and just enjoying the experience of the dinner is the journey. You're instead of worrying about the destination. If I was sitting on a train going to LA, like an Amtrak train, I could be sitting there watching the scenery go by, enjoying the ride, or my mind could be on what's going to happen when I get to LA. And I would miss whatever the experience of the journey itself, I would totally miss, because my mind was on the destination. And our minds do that for everything, not just for train rides. Our mind is always on the destination. And so when we talk about the meditation and the trainings that we do, these trainings are to teach us to recognize that our mind is on the destination, not on the journey. Okay. So when I say we focus on what we bring to this moment, what we bring to this moment is what we have been calling skillful qualities of mind. Like loving kindness and compassion and generosity, goodwill, patience, the things which create a calm, steady mind and clear seeing. And I say, once you have developed the ability to see clearly, the ability to be in the moment, it changes your experience of that moment completely. There can be a wonderful experience of life in even the most mundane circumstances, provided you can be present for that moment. But the only way you can be present for that moment is when you have trained to stop doing the things which prevent you from being present for that moment. What other questions? There's got to be some questions. Am I making it too simple?
No,
Like, for example, you know, I think you asked me a question before about mindfulness. And I, you know, created this course and I called it Putting Buddhist Philosophy Back into Mindfulness. And what I was thinking about when I did that is that mindfulness is ubiquitous in our culture today. Everything is talking about mindfulness. But what they often miss is the important quality, which is one of the things that makes it Buddhist mindfulness, which is the skillful qualities of mind. Because mindfulness only arises in the Buddhist sense, not just in the sense of attention, but in the sense of Buddhist mindfulness. It only arises when your mind has let go of the grasping and the stress and all that. That's when the real mindfulness arises. So mindfulness is a part of the training, but it's also one of the outcomes of the training. You practice mindfulness in order to train, but you also have your mindfulness become enhanced as your training improves or as your training progresses. So, you know, all the things that we talk about when we talk about as skillful qualities in Buddhism, like we talk about concentration as a skillful quality of mind. But a sniper on a battlefield taking aim at the enemy has got very intense concentration, but that's not skillful, not a skillful quality. His mind is not in what we would call a skillful state.
Why is that?
Well, because his intent is kill. And in Buddhist theory,
Well,
intent-
bad goal, but he's still skillful.
no, he's still
He's good.
concentrated. He's still concentrated, but he won't have the kind of a clear mind which Buddhism teaches. There's no wisdom in that. Whereas concentration in the Buddhist teaching is a part of the path to wisdom.
Doesn't that bring you to the fourth noble truth?
The fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, which is really what I'm going to talk about next week.
But I mean, it's within that.
It's, yes,
Divine
yes, right concentration is within that path. It's the last of the 8 limbs of that path. And right concentration, so with a sniper, there's concentration, but there's not right concentration. And we talk about what it means when Buddhism says right. You know, that Noble Eightfold Path has the 8 steps, you know, right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Those are the 8 steps. We'll talk about them in detail next week. But, so, there can be mindfulness which is not right mindfulness, and there can be concentration that's not right concentration. There can be effort that's not right effort. So, we'll talk about what it means when we say something is right effort. Right, all the others next week.
You would have to say that it's not right from the Buddhist perspective, but for a person that is mindful and doing things that are correct, even if they aren't strictly in a Buddhist sense, that's still a benefit.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of people are benefiting greatly from the sort of generic mindfulness that is being taught all over the place now. And that's not to say that, but it doesn't lead to the third noble truth. The third noble truth is this abandoning of expectation And that only arises through the full Eightfold Path. So it may provide great benefits. And it does. I mean, a lot of people, like I say, they get a lot of benefit from mindfulness in all kinds of forms. But it's not, but Buddhist mindfulness has one overriding intention, which is clear seeing, wisdom.
So is it almost a mental aesthetic, what is it when you deny yourself of all? Aestheticism? Asceticism?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
And I don't think, because,
An aesthetic denies himself everything, and is not partaking of any luxuries. Right?
yeah,
So the mind to deny those things, it's kind of, to me, like a tricky situation, because I don't want to find myself, separating from what I understand and perceive as my existence and withdraw. I want to partake.
yeah. But nobody said anything about withdrawal. That's
Right.
what we're saying, is that all the things that you're appreciating now, you can appreciate it the same way, as long as they're skillful. If there's something that you're doing which is unskillful, which involves some harm or something like that, then that has to be abandoned. But for, like the car example, you can still buy the Mercedes if you can afford it.
Mhm.
But you have to have a different frame of mind when you buy that car, or it will become a source of stress.
Right. So
So,
you can value something, but don't be
can-
attached to it,
yeah,
because
yeah.
you know that it's going to eventually
Yeah.
get a door game.
exactly, and I like to use the word appreciate. You can appreciate anything for whatever qualities in that thing that you appreciate, as long as the holding on doesn't begin. And that's the tricky part, is generally contentment makes things a lot easier. Does that make sense? That you can have anything you want, but if you have just tremendous number of things that you want, then it's going to be much harder for you to let go. Whereas if your general approach to things is one of contentment with less.
Wouldn't that also lead to naturally not wanting to have so many?
It
Nice.
does, but it may
Which
be.
I don't want a lot of things, but I mean.
Yeah, and that's part of the ultimate. But the important thing is that it's not giving away those things that you still strongly want. It's those things just go away because you have seen that there's more joy in life without them than with them. And you're still taking care of your family, you're still taking care of your job, you're still taking care of all the things that you need to take care of, but you're doing it with skillful qualities of mind rather than unskillful qualities of mind. And this always is the big argument, because we always hear, or at least I usually do in these classes, I don't have some of the people who usually bring these up, but greed gives me motivation. Greed is good. It gives me motivation to do big things. Or anger gives me energy to oppose the injustice of life. But the problem with both of those is that greed and anger cloud your mind and leave it in a state which it cannot be in touch with life the way that I'm describing is the goal of this practice, to actually experience life in a way which you cannot if you're caught up in greed and anger. So, and you can actually do all the things that you do in life, as long as they're skillful things. You can do all of them better once you've given up the greed and anger than you could before. So nothing in your life has to change other than you lose the stress and lose the struggle and lose the expectations. So again, it's what you're bringing to this moment instead of the focus on what you're getting out of it. Now that's, like I say, easy to say, but it takes doing but it is possible. And what I always recommend is that people work with the smaller things first, the small stresses, see what can be let go for the small stresses to abate, and then work up to the bigger ones. Yes?
I find I hear the idea of designing your life or making your life the life that you want. And I find it hard to square that with the idea of not having expectations. It's almost like you would need a certain expectation in order to go about like making changes in your life. And that's on one end, and then there's like passivity on the other. I was like very black and white thinking, but.
Well, so look at it this way. So think of any thing that you do want in life. Think about how you would create the path for that. For example, if you wanted to get a college degree or something like that, and you would, you've got to study and you've got to do all the things you would need to do to get a college degree. The actual work to get the college degree does not involve any expectation, right? It's just the doing the work that is required to get the college degree. So you can do that without holding on to some expectation for how this is going to come out. Because usually it comes out, right, you have the college degree, and then I'm going to get the job with the and then it goes on and on like that. So what I'm saying is you could say, I'm going to do the work to get the college degree, but I have no expectation for how that will ultimately come out. You can have a intention that you get a college degree and go to work for a law firm. You can have that intention, but you can't have the expectation that that's going to be the way it's going to work out. You see the difference?
Yeah.
So I always come back to the word intention. Intentions are always fine if they're skillful. You can have as many intentions as you want, because intentions is what you bring to this moment. Like, I have an intention to get this degree, so I'm going to do this study tonight because that's my intention to do that. Or I'm going to study for a test, which I have tomorrow, but I can't control how that test is going to come out other than doing the studying that I'm doing. But it still may not come out right. So am I going to be lost in stress about that test? Or am I just going to do the studying without the stress?
But if you fail the test, there's suffering.
If you fail the test, then
You didn't reach your expectation, so it's just a culmination. It's like,
well, so that's why I say don't have the expectation. You
Right.
could have the intention was to study for the test,
right, with the intention to pass the test.
but you can't control the outcome though. You can only control what you bring to it. The outcome is outside of your control.
Right, but it could still end in suffering though, if you failed the test.
It's not if you have already let go of that result.
So at that point, you would have to reevaluate who
You would have to
are,
reevaluate
and then
your
go,
course.
what's the next
Come up
step?
with a new course, yes.
Well, that's life, kind of.
Well, it is, except everybody turns life into a big stress
Mhm.
because of the expectations. But it doesn't have to be, is what I'm saying.
Well, it sounds like it's hand in hand with acceptance.
Well, it's,
At
yeah,
that point, when you
Yeah.
realize that things have to change and you have to reevaluate. And then
I don't use the word acceptance because that word's been overused.
Yeah.
But what I simply say is that you did the work you could, you made your best effort in this, it came out the way it did, and you move forward from there. Because there's always, I mean, there's always a way forward. And part of wisdom is being able to see a way forward from whatever situation that you're in. And this is another thing, if you're all tied up in stress, your ability to see forward to a better way is also impaired. Your ability to see everything is impaired by having this bundle of stress.
So this is the same thing as saying, I'll expect whatever the output is. It's okay.
Well,
I'm going to make my effort, but you expect whatever, you accept whatever happens.
yeah, whatever happens, happens. So that is what you work from there.
So
Does this sound like fatalistic or something? Or
No, it sounds like to me, it's like staying in the moment as each moment arrives.
Yes. Being present for each moment and then working from that moment.
So stress would come both from, say, you pick a goal, you pick something you want, shiny new bicycle, and then there's maybe if there's expectation that you gotta get it, there's stress. But then, let's say, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen, I'm not attached to the outcome, great, but how are you gonna get it? Ooh, there's more stress, trying to figure out how. So we don't need to figure
But why
out,
is there stress in the actual how?
thinking that it rests all on me to figure out, let's say it's $1 million bicycle. They say the universe doesn't know the difference between $10 and $1 million, right? So it's like, all right, add some zeros, or whatever, you know what I mean? If it's a big goal. And then there's no logical way how you can go from A to B and attain it. So then you're like, ooh, the pressure's on, how?
Well, I guess also part of what we're saying has to do with having if there's something which you cannot see a clear path to, then that's not really a realistic goal, right? I mean, that's not something that you could dream about it, I guess, or something like that, but that's not something you're going to work towards because there is no viable path to that.
So you're saying you have to conceive the way it's all gonna be done? What if it gets delivered in a way, things get delivered in a way you don't have any, didn't see it coming at all? You didn't know where that check in the mail came from, or the opportunity.
Well,
you just want.
and I mean, that is part of life, is things like that always happen. So you have to work with whatever is. Complex.
It goes, like almost, it circles back around to equanimity again,
Yes.
accepting, well, I'm not gonna use the word acceptance.
Well, you can use it, that's fine. I just don't use it
But,
myself.
you know,
Yeah.
to be in a place where it's like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And not to hold on to it, but not to shy away from it if it's something that you want to do. It's like having that balance.
Yeah, and there is in the Buddhist text, there's a description of knowledge or wisdom. And they define 3 steps to wisdom. So the first is what we're doing here. You hear a description of something like, this is Buddhist philosophy. Here's a description of Buddhist philosophy. You hear that, or you read it in a book, or you, that's only the first step. The second step is to reflect on that, to talk about it with others, to see it in your life, just to see if there's some validity there. And the third step is to train your mind to be able to see that this is, in fact, wisdom. So if we sit in here in the class talking about this, this is just the first step. In order to actually put it to use, you have to go through all three of those steps. Train your mind to see, because it's in the seeing when you're either in meditation or in your life. If you see a moment where this stress is building up and you see that connection with that stress and that expectation, then that disenchantment with this approach to things sets in. The expectation and the stress go. And the clear seeing arises in its place. So that's the process that has to happen for this to have any meaning. Otherwise, it's just it's just a theory. So in order to see it, the more we're caught up in stress, the more difficult it is for us to see it. So we have to do the training. Well, there's two steps actually. You do the training, which is, train your mind to be able to see when things come up, which is what we do in meditation. We train on, this is coming up, we see it, we investigate it, we note it, and we go back to these sort of things. This is the exact training that we're going to do. And then in real life, what Buddhism talks about is wise reflection. And wise reflection is when you are going through life, you're paying attention, you're being mindful, you're seeing what's going on, and you're recognizing when these things come up, when these theoretical things that we talk about, you recognize them in the flesh when they actually show up. And see the truth of them. You see that, yes, if I do this, it causes stress. Oh, okay. There's some seeing there. And then you can have the opportunity to let that go. Otherwise, you'll just be caught up in the stress and you'll never have the opportunity to let it go. So if you train your mind with the meditation, then you have a greater opportunity to be able to do that wise reflection when it comes up in the day-to-day moments of life. Okay, any other questions? Skepticism? Yes.
Some life circumstances are more prone to expectations. So you have a married couple. The expectation is they won't cheat on each other. You have a job. You expect that when you report for work Monday morning, the doors will be open.
Your paycheck won't bounce.
And the check won't bounce. So you've got these sort of built-in expectations that these sort of contractual things will flow along. And so when they don't, when there's a hiccup, when life happens, I think you have to look at those expectations again and evaluate your response. Acceptance doesn't mean you're condoning the situation.
Right.
It just means that you're accepting.
You're working with
what
it.
is.
Yeah, what I always say is you work with the situation as it is, not as you would have it be.
But I still have the expectation that when I go for Monday morning, the
Yeah.
doors will be open.
Yeah, I have an expectation that when I'm making a cell phone call, it won't drop out, but sometimes it does anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having that kind of understanding about how life is supposed to work, as long as you recognize that often it's not going to work that way.
So
And
we
as long as when it doesn't work out, you don't have a bad day just because that doesn't work out.
Exactly.
So we can act as if without expectation.
We can continue doing exactly what we're doing as long as there's nothing unskillful about the way we're living our life now. We can continue to live our life in the same way, but we just let go of the result when it runs up against the reality of life.
Well, let me put that in a way. If we act as if we have the thing we want, I know I go back to this, but this is my particular kind of, I'm curious about this.
Yeah.
And can you act as if, It's set, there's big, lot of belief systems, they act as if you have the thing you want. Can you do that without being out of the moment and experiencing the moment?
Well, if you are acting as if you have it, you mean, even though you don't actually have it? Or-
Yeah.
Yes, so you're not really dealing with reality there.
What's reality?
Well, reality is what's going on right now. I mean, so in
Well, it's
this,
our perception.
well, yeah, okay, we can get into a discussion about the difference between
That's what I was
perception and
hoping
reality.
for,
Yeah.
No, maybe no one else.
Well, you could try that and see how it works for you. I don't know. I think it's always better to work with what is.
Well, what is, what do you, we could say, this is open, someone might be cold, like they're freezing, this is a really cold day. And I'm like, yeah, this is great, we need more of it. That's, what's reality? It's what it is to you.
You're saying look on the bright side.
No.
Yeah. What's wrong with just dealing with it as it is?
Yeah, I'm all about it, sure.
Yes,
This may tie in with this or not. I've been thinking about this a lot because there are a lot of gurus out there that really, oh my goodness, set the expectations, manifest your true life. They just, and they want your money,
That's it.
for sure. And so my heart breaks because there's so many people out there that if I just get in the right mind state, I'm gonna get what I want. And then you have the second truth, the longing, the craving. And these people are being led down this primrose path of you can manifest wealth, you can manifest $1 million bicycle, you can manifest that window being closed. And people get so tied in with the outcome.
yeah, and so,
And
yeah, and, for what I'm talking about here, I'm really just making the suggestion is look and see if what I'm saying is right or not.
Mhm.
That's all I'm suggesting. And it's not that hard to check. The stress comes up. You see what the tie of the stress is to an expectation or something. And it's, like I say, it's always a choice. It's a very clear-cut choice. You have a choice between peace of mind and ease in life, or pursuing things with this kind of expectation. And like I say, you could have the moment of enjoyment of the new car, or whatever it is, you can feel that, and that's fine. But there will be a point where your peace of mind is going to be gone. And all you need to do this practice that we're talking about is recognize when that moment comes, that the peace of mind is gone.
Could you also apply this concept to the stress which comes from that you don't have a bad expectation of something bad happening to you, because your expectation is nothing bad should happen? Can you apply to that?
It's just the reverse.
That's the fear.
It's just the flip side of the same thing, right? If you have an expectation that something bad is going to happen and you have the stress from that,
Right.
It's just the same thing. If you let go of the stress, but just do what you can to have as good an outcome as you can have, then the outcome is going to be what it's going to be. But if you've done everything you can to Like, for example, I've got this thing going on right now with SDG&E where every time my bill comes in, it's got this huge increase in the use of gas. And I haven't changed anything, you know. My roommate and I just use the same amount of gas every week that we did the week before, and it just goes on like that. It gets colder in the winter, but we don't turn on the heat, so it doesn't use more gas for that. Use a little more for the hot water heater, but basically, I know I'm getting charged the incorrect amount on this thing. But I've had SDG come, they've checked the meter, they say it's fine. The people who own the apartment say all the appliances are fine. Nobody has any explanation. I've done everything I possibly could to resolve this situation. Or everything that I could think of so far to resolve the situation. It's still not resolved, so I'm paying extra for my gas. I don't like that, but am I gonna stay awake at night worrying about the fact that I'm paying more? Because I can't do anything about it. I've exhausted the avenues of resolution for this that I'm aware of so far, and so far it's still not resolved. So now I'm going through my bill. I found out you can go online and actually see your daily usage of gas. So I'm going and seeing if that tracks what we know we're actually doing. Maybe I can show that you know, there's something wrong with the meter that way. You know, there's things I can do, but I just have to just, you know, that's just the way it is. And if I can move, but short of that, I don't know any other way to resolve this right now. So, I mean, there are things that you just have to work with as they are. Any other questions about this? Does anyone see a way of working with this, a way of going forward with it?
I used to say that when you buy a new car, put a scratch intention.
Well, you know, and I mean, that is just the kind of things that you work with. Is everything, I mean, we have so many expectations, so it's not hard to find something to work with on this. Just see the stress arise as it does, when it does. Pay attention, see what's going on. Like I said, with that an area that think about the dinner I started out with, where you have an expectation. I was trying to create an image. I was trying to create an image that would be seen by this other person in a certain way. And then, because this image was seen by the other person in this way, there would be some, you know, some expectation for what's going to come after that. So it was a whole process. But it gets all lost in just all the stress. You don't see, but you can see the whole step-by-step process of your mind as it's creating this, if you really pay attention. And that's how you recognize what's going on and are able to let it go. And I say, if you can let it go, and if you ever have any instance where you can let it go, that gives you the opportunity to experience what life is like without that. And that's the most important thing. That's how the third noble truth arises, is when you experience it. The Four Noble Truths, each of them have a task for each of the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth of dukkha is to understand what dukkha is. The second noble truth with the craving or the stress is to abandon that, to let it go. And the third noble truth, which is the feeling of joy and peace of mind that arises with the letting go, the task for that is to experience it. Because if you experience this task, or this peace of mind, this freedom, this joy, then it propels your practice on to other things. That you can do this more and more in your life. So it's through that experiencing that energy arises in your practice. Okay. Any other questions? Concerns? Skepticism? Anything? Okay, actually, I've used up the whole hour. We don't have time for the meditation today, and I'm sorry for that. I don't like to do that. I talked too much today. But maybe next week I'll do the meditation first, and that way we won't miss it. Okay, is that it? All right, well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.